This is my favorite chapter of any Project Moon game, ever. I will be exploring new people, items, ideas, and concepts introduced in this chapter. This chapter is loaded with character development and payoffs that I will be analyzing as well. I know I am harping about character growth in a series about what we learned in the city, but these are the movers and shakers of the city, or at least will be. Their development and story is history in the making. Is that not something important to note? I will also be introducing this border around footage when I'm speaking about theories. It's one thing to be analytical about situations, it's another to be theoretical about them. Fanbases have a horrible case of latching on to the most crackshit theories and treating them as fact. We start Chapter 5 with the Lord of the Rings reference, and it won't be the last reference we get in this chapter either. They feel less like out-of-place jokes now and more pop culture jokes that you would actually make with your friends who share your interest. Kinda recontextualizes the big meaty claws joke from 3.5. The laws of the Great Lakes. Whew. This is what I made the series for. The absolute insanity of these laws serving no surface level purpose other than to make ships dance to their tune is one of the city's greatest strengths. Despite being called laws, they are not allowed to be written down in any fashion. The laws are most likely regulated by U-Corp since they have a taboo against unauthorized recordings of their laws. Keyword here being unauthorized, implying there are at times that it is permitted. Honglu was forced to do training. I'm not mincing words here either. He recognized that his family was forcing him to do the training. Each lake has a different law, but there are overall laws, like taboos and city taboos. More than these exist, but they include not lingering for too long and only being able to cross at certain times. Should one fail, the vessel is to be struck by the lake's waves and attempt to sink it. However, unlike many of the other laws of the cities, these can be defied to an extent, as we will see later. Honglu mentions that their family has a whole set of rules. Either they are so numerous that he couldn't hope to follow them all, or he is extremely lax in actually following them. I am living for the sassy Ishmael this chapter. This also showcases Dante's growth as well as he learns to lean on the expertise of his sinners. There are 5 great ports as explained by Faust. While we only see one this chapter, Marlin Port. Unless we go back to U-Corp at some point or in another game, I don't believe we will get the names of the others outside of perhaps an offhand comment from Ishmael in the future. Mermaids here remind me of Miss Mermaid from the 8 O'Clock Circus. Unlikely to be related after what we see in this chapter though the mermaids share no resemblance to the ones we see in this chapter, other than just being fishy. However, we see that there is a big spread on how much they can look, so who knows? The Great Lakes economy outside of U-Corp is based around the fishing exports done by the whalers. This includes whale and mermaid products galore. And here we get to see more peeking into the memories of sinners as they rage. This is explained later as a side effect of collecting bows up to this point. It's so strong at this point that he can even peer into the memories and visions of those who are not sinners. This chapter shows that they are triggered by feelings of extreme emotions in the individuals being peered into. Part 6 shows us that Mersol is the club goer of the group. Now this is golden knowledge. Thank you to DKLN Art on Twitter for this image. The club goer who seems to work for U-Corp is surprised by Faust's promiscuity. And I agree. I think 12 would be beyond my limit as well. I always assumed clubs are part of the city, but it's nice to see firsthand that even though things are quite bad in the city, people will find a way to find enjoyment where they can. Being protected by the middle is a big deal. This chapter is the first we actually get to see of their culture. They are family-oriented and take any slight against them very seriously. They make use of the Book of Grudges, which is, of all things I wasn't expecting, a dwarf thing from Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Basically, as long as your name is on this glorified shit list, the middle will never stop in their quest to get revenge. The book also has some rules for punishment down to some very specific crimes, as we can see with Heathcliff. Dante taking action is all the growth I could have ever wanted. Ishmael is just as shocked as we are at intuition, as it feels as if who he was before losing his memories is starting to shine through. Obviously, this is still unclear if this is the old Dante returning or him growing into a proper manager. Pilot is a great addition to the before team. Definitely can't wait for the sinner who resonates with them the most to see them die. Also, Sod is alive, and no one was told? I get that it isn't really pertinent to their mission, but man, come on Limbus Company. It also makes me think that Effie's mercy execution was for naught since the after team was hot on their trail. We should specify that the white whale is one of the 5 calamities mentioned in this chapter. It's kinda crazy that we are told that there are 5, however, one is already dead by the time we learn about this. but more on that later when it's more topical. Not only can you not write down the lake's laws, they are partially obscured as well. What a mess. Personally, I am very interested in the ships made of wood. You'd think in this age all ships would be made of metal at this point. I wonder where they source the wood, or why they choose to use it. Singularities most likely. Spikes on the bottom of the boat are obviously to deter whales and mermaids in the sea. Oddly enough, you'd think this would be a real practice at some point in time, and I'm not saying that it has never happened, but it was actually not even a common thing in the time of believing sea monsters existed. Most importantly, because you have such spikes on the bottom of your boat, it would completely fuck up the way your boat would sail. No pertinent data has been updated is oddly robotic in nature. Faust has some very standout speaking mannerisms put on display in this chapter. More on this towards the end. I actually love that Oidis notices that she survived the waves before. That's the cunning I expect from her. Say what you will about Grandma, but she is still very scary in terms of her perceptiveness. And here we get the first real view of a whale, and they are terrifying. Whales themselves are monsters that parasitize human victims and turn them into mermaids. There is no standard for a whale beyond this aspect. We see the white whale, the one that attacks Mephistopheles, the one from the first wave scene, and the one that stole people off of the party boat. Only the ones that attacked in the wave attack, and the party boat whale, share similar visual aspects. Mermaid infamy is known across the city, and how could they not? These things are horrifying, and aside from the crabs, these are the closest things we have right now to real monsters in the city before everything happened with Lobotomy Corporation. Dante mentions that they had a similar feeling about abnormalities and distortions. This is quickly surmised by the fact that they were once human. Note, they are not abnormalities or distortions. If they were, Dante would have said as such. He simply got this feeling because they were once human, and is a neat feature to learn about how we can distinguish these beings. Within the final shot of the Great Lakes, we can see sinkholes, major ports, and other such objects. The most enticing for me is that large island in the upper right. We also got a good look at all the other ships that are going out and about. Dante is learning a sense of humor, a rather dark sense of humor, but it's something, and I am living for it. And here we get another look at the whale and its mermaids, a tower of tentacles. The opening shot here shows us that the white whale's solidification can affect far more than living material, as it has taken over the entirety of Lobotomy Corporation branch. We are shown another plot power of the Golden Bow. It has the unique power of reversing politification within its vicinity. These beings taken over by the membrane use human-based combat. It makes me wonder if there is still a glimpse of humanity deep below, per Ishmael's wishes. We do get to see later that there are those who still hold on to their faculties. Someone translated the Morse code that is shown on the enemy's names and skills. A few are garbled gunk, which I believe is to show how far they have gone, but most are manageable. If you tried to translate them and failed, then I would suggest using the original language, that being Korean. Props to Reddit for the translations. Rim's party wants whoever gets the bows to use it for a better future. He calls them to be sovereigns of a star. A star of the city, perhaps? The wording implies that they are against the head in that fashion. They are working towards a future that involves those with the mark. Rim himself was once part of the League of Nine. Yi Sang can recognize him despite the distortion he has undergone. The stem of the world is mentioned here. Mark it down in your glossaries. Are you ready, kids? Another bloody SpongeBob reference. Ryoshu might actually be the most level-headed or well-adjusted party member of the Sinners. Well, the most well-adjusted to the city and what it has to offer, that is. She is the strongest member before linking up with the Sinners, so it makes sense that she is the most matter-of-fact in situations where she can see certain death. And she seems content with it, really stands by her dog-eat-dog world belief, and accepts that it was potentially about to be her turn on the chopping block. Ricardo and the Middle are absolutely using the tattoo tech that the Kurakomo clan uses as well. However, this one seems amplified based on the way that it glows when they wind up their attacks. Being able to be knocked out of their identity is a new one. It shows that the Sinners maintain some level of concentration on the technique, since if it was Dante focusing on keeping the form, it would make no sense for the Sinner themselves to physically get knocked out of it. This is accompanied by the fact that Sinners return to their regular clothes and weapons when they die, or are turned into a pile of mush. Rewind time? No, self-destruct time. Faust and Limbus Company, perhaps even Dante himself before amnesia, would rather see the bows destroyed than picked up by someone else. Faust speaks as if the fate of the world hangs on it. The red button on the back of his head, being a self-destruct button, is a very worrying tool. Fun fact, this was actually foreshadowed before the game even came out. In Ryoshu's blurb, we can see advice for Dante to kill himself with a button should she prove too much of a headache. Headache. I didn't even mean that one. I am not a fan of Deus Ex Machinas, but this is how you introduce a color. Just once I want to see the sinners be the Deus Ex Machina for someone else. Not counting Pilot, I want a big damn hero moment. It has shown that Faust thought ahead, as she knows all after all, and recruited the Indigo Elder before setting off. Faust has brought aboard 2 colors. Who the fuck is she? The Marlin whale was hunted and exterminated. Very interesting. This is what Virgil meant earlier by only mentioning 4 calamities. It is also implied that the Indigo Elder is the first person to ever best a calamity, something that no one person, let alone a group, has done before. We see later that he has mastered the power of Shin, something I have failed to mention up until this point. To play a bit of catch-up, it is a neutral ground ability that uses the light distributed into the city to reinforce their attacks or materials without positive or negative feelings. It is the true middle ground between ego and distortion. We've seen Virgil, Yori's goons, Damien, and now the Indigo Elder make use of it. It is safe to say that Yori herself can use it as well, based off of this info. This is also the oldest man we have seen in the sitting by outward appearance. The only one who outwardly looks as old is the thumb capo, Callow. Something is actually holding Virgil back from working with us. An assumption, but it's most likely that the journey for the Bows is tied to the Sinner's growth, and stepping in to solve all of their issues could obviously rob them of those opportunities. Similar to Virgil in the real Divine Comedy, he is here only to show them the path and act as a guide, and act as insurance they don't get too far in over their head. X-Corp alloys. What a treasure trove this chapter is. We don't get any further info just yet beyond the fact that they are seemingly one of the strongest, if not the strongest material known in the city. The Indigo Elder comments that Dante's head might be a singularity. Someone as weathered and wise as he would not make such an assumption lightly. However, singularities are proprietary works of a wing, so either Limbus Company is on track to be the next L-Wing as we expect them to be, or it is a singularity of another corp that has not been disclosed to the vast majority of the public. Similar to how no one knew of Cogito outside of Lobotomy Corp, or how warp trains really work outside of those in a very close-knit need-to-know basis. Here we solidify that Dante has real mind-reading powers now. Personally, I prefer this solely for the reason that we get to see experiences as such that we would never otherwise see, or ever learn about. Faust confirms that buildings are dense underground as well, not just LobCorp buildings. If my memory serves correctly, the building Moses was hired to investigate was also predominantly underground as well. The LCA is competent enough to destroy the Pilot Whale. Interesting. Well, they believe themselves confident enough to do so. We later learn that this would have most likely been impossible. Faust knows all. Faust knows we have plot armor. Note about Faust's speaking pattern here. She says sinners' bodies instead of our bodies. This could be interpreted 2 ways, as one does line up with her constantly speaking in the third person, so it would make sense that she still considers herself amongst one of the sinners. Or it could mean that she doesn't consider herself amongst the sinners, which is equally valid given how important to the company she is.
We don't talk about Pequot Town, who had Love Town on their bingo sheet because fuck you in particular.
Heathcliff has my exact reaction to Ryoshu, except I think she gets off at it in a lewd way. So, for the ego gifts of this dungeon, a knot obviously represents Ishmael's desire to finish the job, even if she dies doing so. A reverse knot isn't a real knot, rather it is how you can tie a knot that already exists, such as a clinch knot. It is simply a reflected version of the knot. It most likely symbolizes the flipping of events as we or Ishmael would expect them in this scenario. No one saw themselves joining Ahab for the talk. Inflation is a thing in the city, not a thing I really considered until it was brought up. It makes sense now though, and is unfortunately canon. Ishmael used to hate long hair when she was part of the ship. Most likely grew it out to leave her old life behind. We see that she did have short hair while working at her wing. That wing most likely being U-Corp, but it could be one of the other corps, this being S, T, and V Corps. Though I feel her growing out her hair is directly despite the old sailor's life, seeing as Ahab completely destroyed any love she might have for the profession. Our corp has a literal fortress. Not expecting that kind of information in this chapter, but then again I didn't see X-Corp getting name dropped either.
You know, the funny thing is, I know you're playing me, but you're right.
A lava whale. Perhaps another calamity. Please let us see the lava whale at some point. Please, I beg you, Project Moon. Ahab confirms that they have been in this whale for years at this rate. Now, this could be her madness speaking, or it could be a chance to enlighten our timeline a bit. So take this with a grain of salt. If she has been here for years, let's say 2 to be conservative, That means sinners have been gathered for quite some time, since Ishmael wouldn't have accepted the offer with the promise to get back at Ahab if she wasn't her sworn enemy yet. It doesn't put into perspective her ties with the bows, but we do know that the bow was eaten rather recently, at least since the before team rookie pilot was locked up by the middle and the hook after they had been seen through the facility. So that begs the question of how the Pequod crew has avoided politification for so long. At the very least, they have managed the month since the start of Limbus. Gauging by how long Ishmael's hair has grown, this might actually be years. Ahab always speaks honestly, even if they are manipulative, conniving, and opportunistic. Oh, and batshit crazy. We can't forget about batshit crazy. Enough so that she gaslights herself into believing whatever she wants. In Moby Dick, Queequeg and Ishmael had a rather friendly relationship, to put it lightly. I am glad to see that it is kept here, though it seems to have been turned into a more nurturing motherly role at times, with some awfully explicit imagery. Moby Dick is one of the few books related to the sinners I actually properly read before Limbus. It makes sense that the city would have the norm of cremation. There isn't really a lot of room to go around burying bodies. Hell, most die in the streets and don't even get cremated since the cleaners get to them first. Queequeg being an outsider per se makes sense that she would have different customs. Mommy, sorry, I mean, Pip being African American and Queequeg being Pacific Islander in the original works is translated to Limbus at least via darker skin tones. This could be a chance to show us just how really fucking big the city is to have that kind of racial diversity. Or it might just be an artistic design, who knows. Breaking into a captain's quarter is a taboo. A desperate's knot is not a real thing. My theory is falling apart, but at least I got a pun out of it. A cross knot is a real knot though. Typically it's just used for loops. Your guess is as good as mine as for what it might represent. But I did see one search relating it to a friendship knot. Perhaps it shows the trust of the crew making their way through the vascules. Faust knows abnormalities were once humans. This shouldn't be a surprise given how much she uses Cogito for Mephi. I honestly forget if this has been brought up before or not, so I'm including it anyway. None of the sinners seem particularly upset with this revelation to Queequeg. Whalers are usually those running from their past. Typical to not ask for their past. Not a city or a U-Corp taboo, but more of a general, traditional taboo. Queequeg was from the middle. This explains why the middle was looking around U-Corp. They were looking for Queequeg, and is why Ishmael said that she knew where Queequeg is to the bouncer out front. The middle may act on their grudges even if they don't personally want to. The urban legend of the kid and the ice cream exemplifies that. Even if it isn't 100% true, it shows that, to them, the middle literally does not let go of the smallest slight. And here I thought we might have a somewhat sane finger on our hands. The middle marks your entire body, your speech, and your brain as well. Could be metaphorical, but after what we've seen that happens in the city, it could very well just as well be literal. Compulsive knot is also not a thing. That I could find anyway. Yes, I am writing them as not in the script. Oh shit! Queequeg says it's a real knot in this world at least. We stay winning. Ishmael straight up tells us that the whale oil is at least considered to be the inspiration for U-Corp singularity. I love how this lore recontextualizes how mermaids are made by literally becoming one with the whale. Ishmael says born again. Certainly, the imagery is there. Born again seems to be a theme of this chapter, starting a new life. Ishmael sought to leave her life at the wing as a feather and start anew. She yearned to get revenge on Ahab, abandoning her sailor's life for that of a sinner. Queequeg was also running from the middle and became a whaler as such. And in the end, Ishmael lets go of her desire for revenge and embraces her new life, putting all of her past lives behind her. The captain's infectious madness is downright captivating. I think Ahab is my favorite villain in the whole of Project Moonworks now. Saw this coming a mile away, but what a fucking ego. And this is a common misobservation people love to throw around willy-nilly, but her ego really does resemble a claw extremely well. From the fact that the scale and the sheer damage that can inflict is here, to the fact that they both use injectable consumables to enhance their power. Ahab's ship flew under the 8 Association, which we can now presume is the association that deals with whalers. Jesus Christ, that is a massive gunship. And no, this doesn't break the city's rules on guns. Cannons are not classified as firearms, they are known as destructive devices. Individuals cannot own them, but corporations can. And here are the ending notes going forward. All members we see in Chapter 5 that aren't part of the original sinners are well-known sea stories. Ahab, Starbuck, and Queequeg are all part of the Pequod, being the captain, first mate, and harpooner or such, Stubb being the second mate, and Pip is the cabin boy. The Indigo Elder is an allusion to the Old Man in the Sea. Rim is based off of the sea and the butterfly. Smee and the Hook Pirates are obviously from Peter Pan, which is a weird choice given just how sea-based the others are in comparison. Like, yes, they're pirates, but also Peter Pan wasn't really a pirate story. It caught me so off guard, even though I saw it coming a mile away. I can't believe they used the "call me Ishmael" as an actual line, and instead of making it cringe, they made it the most hype thing. Overall, I was greatly impressed with the visual, story, and combat challenge aspects to the whole chapter. It's a recipe for disaster, but dare I say that my expectations for the next chapter are through the roof? Heathcliff has crept into being my favorite sinner over the course of the past year, and I am really hoping they hit the home run.